A black mechanic fixes a Hell's Angels bike and gets fired. What happens next will shock everyone. In a small-town garage, one man's skill with machines changed everything. Derek, a humble black mechanic, brought a roaring Harley back to life, earning the respect of a feared Hell's Angel. But what followed wasn't gratitude. It was betrayal. He lost his job, his reputation, and nearly his future. What happened next will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story about bikes. It's about respect, injustice, and how one man turned his darkest moment into unstoppable strength. Watch till the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will open your eyes and touch your heart. The morning sun barely peeked through the grimy windows of the small-town garage, spilling streaks of light over grease-stained floors and rusting tools. The air carried the heavy scent of motor oil, old tires, and sweat. Derek wiped his hands on a rag, his strong, calloused fingers blackened from years of labor. He was no ordinary mechanic. To him, every bolt, every piston, every engine had a heartbeat. He didn't just fix machines. He listened to them, breathed with them, and gave them life again. But few people noticed. To his boss, Derek was just another worker, cheap, replaceable, and easy to ignore. He was often underpaid, his ideas dismissed, his efforts overshadowed by men who couldn't even tighten a bolt without his help. But Derek never complained. He worked with pride, knowing one day his skill would speak louder than any words he could ever say. That day came with the sound of thunder. It started faint, distant, like a storm rolling in from the mountains. Then it grew louder, sharper, more menacing, until the ground itself seemed to tremble. Heads turned. The mechanics in the shop stopped mid-task, their wrenches frozen in the air. A Harley-Davidson, jet black with chrome flames licking its sides, rolled into the lot. The machine coughed and sputtered, smoke hissing from the exhaust. But it wasn't the bike that made hearts pound. It was the man riding it. Leather jacket, steel-toed boots, tattoos crawling up his arms. On the back of his vest was stitched a patch that made every jaw tighten. Hell's Angels. The rider cut the engine and silence fell like a curtain. No one in town messed with the Angels. They weren't just bikers. They were a force, a shadow, a brotherhood that demanded respect and fear in equal measure. And now one of them stood in the doorway of their quiet little shop. "Bike's dead," the man growled, tossing his gloves on the counter. His voice was low, rough, like gravel dragged across pavement. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and impatient. "You got anyone here who can fix it?" The shop owner, a man who loved to talk big when no one dangerous was around, suddenly found his throat dry. He stammered, stepping back. Well, we can take a look. Might take some time." The biker's gaze cut him off cold. The other mechanics shuffled nervously, none daring to move. To them, this wasn't a job, it was a trap. Fix it wrong, and you'd make an enemy. Fail to fix it, and you'd look useless. No one wanted to risk it, except Derek. He stepped forward, rag still in his hand, eyes steady. He didn't see the jacket. He didn't see the tattoos or the reputation. He only saw a broken engine crying out to be healed. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked calmly, his voice steady against the thick silence. The biker turned, raising a brow. His lips curved into a half-smile, half-challenge. You sure about that?" Derek nodded. "I've fixed worse." The biker smirked, crossing his arms. "All right then, kid. Show me." The crowd of mechanics exchanged doubtful looks. Some whispered under their breath, certain Derek was about to embarrass himself. But as soon as his hands touched the Harley, the air shifted. He crouched low, his fingers brushing the pipes, the chain, the valves. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening, like a doctor with a stethoscope pressed against a patient's chest. Then he went to work. Tools clanged. Sparks flew. Sweat glistened on his brow as he loosened bolts, tightened screws, adjusted the timing. His hands moved with precision, as though he had rehearsed this very moment 1,000 times in his dreams. The biker watched closely, his smirk fading into curiosity. Minutes passed. The other mechanics hovered, wide-eyed, watching a performance none of them could match. It wasn't just fixing, it was art. Derek's focus was unbreakable, his confidence unwavering. With every turn of his wrench, he carved silence out of doubt, respect out of fear. Finally, Derek wiped his hands, stood, and nodded toward the bike. "Try it now." The biker slipped back into the seat, twisted the key, and hit the starter. For a heartbeat, the world froze. Then, roar! The The Harley came alive, its engine growling deep and thunderous, louder and prouder than ever before. The sound rattled the walls, vibrating through every chest in the garage. It wasn't just fixed, it was reborn. The biker's jaw dropped slightly, his eyes widening. He revved it once, twice, testing the strength of the machine. It answered him with pure power, flawless and fierce. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, glancing at Derek. "Didn't think you had it in you." The room erupted in whispers. The mechanics looked at Derek like they had never seen him before. The boss, standing in the corner, clenched his fists in frustration. But Derek didn't bask in the attention. He just gave a small nod as if this was all in a day's work. Inside, though, his heart pounded. Not from fear, but from the quiet pride of knowing he had just done the impossible and earned the respect of a man the whole town feared. What Derek didn't know was that this single moment, this single act of skill and courage, would set off a chain of events that would change everything. Today he had fixed a bike. Tomorrow he would face betrayal, heartbreak, and a choice that would shock the entire town. The roar of the Harley still echoed in Derek's mind long after the biker had left the shop. For the first time in years he felt alive, proud, as if the world had finally seen what he was truly capable of. His hands had given breath back to a machine that even the feared Hell's Angels doubted could ride again. And in that moment, respect, the kind no one could fake or buy, had been his. But not everyone in the garage shared his triumph. Behind the counter, Derek's boss, Carl, watched with narrowed eyes. He didn't see pride in Derek's skill, he saw a threat. For years, Carl had enjoyed being the face of the shop, taking credit for work his mechanics did. Customers respected him not for what he could fix, but for the business he claimed to run. And now, in front of the toughest customer they had ever faced, Derek had stolen the spotlight. That evening, after the last tool was hung and the last bike rolled out, Carl called Derek into the office. The room smelled of stale coffee and old paperwork. A single flickering bulb buzzed overhead, casting shadows across Carl's face. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a sneer tugging at his lips. "Close the door," Carl said. Derek obeyed, wiping his hands on his rag. He expected maybe a word of acknowledgement, some rare praise for saving the shop's reputation, maybe even a small bonus. Instead, Carl's words hit like a hammer. "You embarrassed me today." Derek blinked. "What?" "You heard me," Carl snapped, slamming a hand on the desk. "You acted like some kind of hero in front of that biker. Like this place runs because of you." His voice dripped with jealousy. "Customers will start thinking you're the real deal, not me. And that's not how this works." Derek felt his chest tighten. "Carl, I was just doing my job." The man needed help. Nobody else stepped up. "That's the problem." Carl cut him off, standing now, his face red with anger. "You made me look weak? You think these people respect you? You think they'll come here asking for Derek instead of Carl? Not happening. Not in my shop." Silence hung heavy between them. Derek's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. He had swallowed his pride 1,000 times before, but this felt different. Carl leaned forward, his voice low and cruel. "Pack up your tools. You're finished here." The words stung sharper than any blade. Derek stared at him, searching for some trace of reason, some sign that this was just anger speaking. But Carl's eyes were cold, resolved. "You're firing me?" Derek asked, his voice heavy with disbelief. Carl smirked, lighting a cigarette as if the decision meant nothing. "You brought this on yourself." "Nobody outshines me in my own shop." Derek stood frozen for a moment, the rag in his hand falling silently to the floor. Fired for being the best. Fired for saving the very man who could have destroyed their garage if his bike hadn't been fixed. It made no sense, but deep down Derek knew the truth. Jealousy had no logic. Word spread faster than wildfire. By morning, whispers traveled across town. Derek had been reckless, disrespectful, arrogant. Some said he had stepped out of line by taking the job from his boss. Others claimed he had offended the Angels by touching a bike without permission. Lies twisted like smoke until Derek's name, once carried with respect, was dragged through the dirt. Neighbors looked at him differently. Customers who once asked for his advice avoided his gaze. Even friends grew silent, afraid of being caught in the storm around him. What stung most was not losing his job. It was losing his place in the town he had worked so hard to serve. That night, Derek walked home under the dim glow of streetlights. His boots scuffed against the pavement, heavy with each step. His mind replayed Carl's words over and over. his heart a battlefield of anger and pain. He had given everything to that garage, his skill, his loyalty, his sweat, and in return, he had been thrown aside like scrap metal. As he reached his small house at the edge of town, Derek sat on the porch, staring into the darkness. The chirp of crickets filled the silence, but inside him was a storm. He wanted to shout, to rage, to demand the respect he had earned. But he also knew the truth of the world he lived in. Sometimes talent wasn't enough. Sometimes, no matter how much you proved yourself, jealousy and prejudice could strike you down. Yet, as the night stretched on, Derek made himself a quiet promise. They could take his job, they could smear his name, but they couldn't strip him of what truly mattered: his skill, his integrity, his pride in honest work. Somewhere in the distance, the faint rumble of motorcycles echoed through the night. Derek didn't know it yet, but those engines carried the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. Because the same biker whose Harley he had saved wasn't finished with him. And soon, the town that turned its back on Derek would watch in shock as his story took a turn no one expected. 2 days passed since Derek's world collapsed. His tools lay untouched in a corner of his small house, still coated in grease and dust, reminders of the work that had once given him purpose. He had spent hours sitting on the porch, staring at the horizon, replaying the betrayal over and over in his mind. The pride he had felt when that Harley roared back to life now seemed like a cruel memory, a spark that had only led to darkness. But the storm wasn't over. On the third evening, just as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with streaks of red and gold, Derek heard it. A distant rumble, low, steady, growing louder with every second. He froze. It wasn't one bike this time. It was many. The sound of a pack rolling in together, their engines like thunder rolling down from the heavens. His neighbors peeked through their curtains. Children were pulled inside. The town knew that sound. Fear spread like fire. Within minutes, a line of Harleys turned onto Derek's street, chrome flashing in the dying light, leather jackets bearing the unmistakable patch of the Hells Angels. Derek stood, his heart pounding. He had expected humiliation from Carl, but this felt like Judgment Day. The gang parked their bikes in front of his house, engines cutting off one by one, leaving a heavy silence. Then, from the middle of the pack, the same biker whose Harley he had fixed stepped forward. His boots crunched against the gravel. His face was unreadable, a mix of grit and respect. Derek braced himself, ready for threats, maybe even violence. Instead, the biker extended his hand. "You got guts," the man said, his voice deep but steady. "And skill. More than any mechanic I've ever met. You fixed my bike when no one else dared touch it. Men like you," he paused, glancing at his crew, "don't come around often." Derek didn't move at first. "So why are you here?" he asked carefully, suspicion heavy in his tone. The biker's lips curved into a half smile. "Because I owe you. And because I heard what your boss did to you." Derek's chest tightened. Of course, word had spread even to them. "That man didn't fire you because you failed," the biker continued. "He fired you because he's afraid of you. Afraid the world would see what he already knows. You're better than him. He thought he could bury your name, but he was wrong." From behind his back, the biker pulled out a jacket, not marked with the Angels patch, but custom-made, stitched with bold letters. "Iron Soul Garage." He held it out. "We're opening a new place, a shop that's going to service every road warrior who rides through this county. And I don't want a boss like Carl running it. I want you. You'll be in charge. You'll get the respect you've earned," the crowd gasped. Neighbors who had been hiding now peeked openly. Children whispered to each other. In one moment, the man the town had cast aside was being lifted higher than anyone imagined. Derek looked at the jacket, his hands trembling slightly. He thought about the long nights in the garage, the betrayal, the shame he had carried walking home alone. He thought about the whispers, the lies, the way his name had been dragged through the dirt. And now here was proof that respect couldn't be stolen, that jealousy couldn't kill true talent. Slowly he reached out and took the jacket. The biker grinned. The Angels behind him revved their engines in approval, the sound filling the night sky like a promise. Derek slipped the jacket on. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for him all along. He stood taller, prouder, the weight of injustice falling off his shoulders. For the first time in days, he smiled. "You don't know what you just started," Derek said, his voice strong. The biker laughed. "Oh, I think I do. The engines roared again, louder, fiercer, as if the entire street had come alive. Derek stood among them, no longer just a fired mechanic, no longer a victim of betrayal. He was a man reborn, a leader rising from the ashes of injustice. The town watched in awe. The man they thought was finished had just begun a new chapter, one that no jealousy, no lies, and no betrayal could ever erase. And as the night settled in, one truth burned brighter than ever: respect is greater than wealth, and real strength can never be silenced. Derek lost his job, his reputation, and nearly his future, all because of jealousy. But instead of breaking him, betrayal became the spark that lifted him higher. The Hell's Angel he helped came back, not with threats, but with respect, offering Derek the chance to lead a new garage of his own. In one moment, the man everyone doubted rose from the ashes, proving a truth no one could deny. Real talent can't be fired. Real respect can't be stolen. And when life tries to bury you, it only plants the seed for something greater.